Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you again. I'm Victoria Beale and I'm your host this evening for NTV Unscripted. It's been about a year since I've been here, can you believe that? So it's wonderful to be back, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my very first guest for the next couple of years when we're going to be bringing you NTV Unscripted, hopefully weekly soon. I'm welcoming the wonderful Tony Courtney-Brown, who is a holistic clinic owner based in London. Tony, it's wonderful to have you here, back after a year break for me. How are you today?
Fine, thank you, Victoria.
Great. So look, what I want to do is I want everyone to get to know you first of all, before we talk about your kind of amazing business. So do you want to talk about the early years and where you were born and how you came to be on this planet?
Sure. My parents were part of the Windrush generation and came over from Jamaica in the 50s. And my mum was a nurse, and she was living in a bedsit in Northampton at the time. Okay. And my dad was at university in Nottingham, and I came along at an inconvenient time.
Well, babies are, you know, bit of a shock, but how was it inconvenient from your sort of perspective?
Well, from my mother's perspective, she had to go to work and do shifts, and I was just there in the bedsit. So she used to put a load of records on the old radiograms, and you used to be able to stack them up, you know, if you had 78s or 33s or 45s. So if she'd put a load of 33s, which are the long playing ones on, she'd stack them up and then go to work. And I was fine while the music was on, but when the music stopped, I would wail and scream the place down.
So party animal from a very young age. From
the beginning.
Fantastic. Great stuff. So as you obviously got older, then talk us through kind of like, you know, sort of summarise growing up and that kind of stuff. That'd be great.
Sure. So Mum had two choices really, and the one that she decided on was to have me fostered.
Right.
And so I was fostered for the first 6 years.
Wow.
Now, in those days, it was very difficult because most of the foster parents were white people, and whether you're a man or a woman and you're pushing a pram around with a black baby in it, you got abuse. And so I was moved from several places until I ended up with some lovely Dutch people who kept me until I was 6 years old.
Wow. And then what happened then when you started with the Dutch family? I'm interested.
Had a lovely time with them, grew up on a flower nursery, and my first memories are of flowers just stretching out into the distance.
Wow.
And I had a lovely time. Then when I was 6, my parents had got themselves sorted out and bought a house, and then I went back to live with them. Well, went to live with them because I'd never lived with them previously.
Right, okay. So again, moving on from there, we want to understand how you went from this childhood, it's a very interesting childhood, to where you are now. So as you developed into your teens and so forth.
Yes, so I went back to live with my parents. We didn't sort of hit it off because they had certain expectations of me. And I'm not quite sure that I fulfilled them. My dad in particular had very, very high expectations. So at 6 I couldn't watch Tom and Jerry, I had to watch University Challenge.
Oh, well that explains why you're so intelligent. See, I knew there was a reason. Excellent. So, I mean, in terms of this kind of, you know, it sounded quite a strict upbringing, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about how, obviously what you're doing now, how that links to the childhood incidents that you had, the stuff that you went through, because I think our audience would be interested in that.
Sure. My father was a very clever guy, and he made a lot of money very quickly. And when I failed the 11 plus, he decided to send me to boarding school.
Right. There's some pictures there of you on the screen. Yes. Lovely.
That's me, my foster father and foster brothers.
Foster brothers, yeah. Fantastic. So sorry, yes, you were saying.
Then when I was 15, my parents separated and all kinds of things happened at home. And I was sent to see the doctor, who determined that I was depressed.
Right.
And put me on antidepressants.
And how old were you, sorry?
15.
15 years old, on antidepressants, wow.
But then I was kept on them for the next 45 years.
45 years, wow. And just talk me through first of all, how did that feel? Like, in terms of like, what kind of like side effects did you experience being on those tablets for so long?
Well, if you open any packet of antidepressants, it will tell you the contraindications, one of which is that you might feel suicidal or depressed.
Right.
So it kind of makes you think, what's the point? However, when you start taking them, if you're on them for a very long time, then you become addicted, physically and psychologically.
Right.
And they have other impacts on the body as well. For instance, you can start to put on a lot of weight, depending on which ones you take and how your body reacts.
Right, okay. And did you experience some of these side effects?
I did. I put some weight on as I got older, and I felt very drowsy a lot of the time. And it gave me mood swings too, which were quite unpredictable. You never knew how you were going to be. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down.
And how are you able to function? Because obviously you've done extremely well in your life, despite that. And obviously it's clear to say that a lot of people do take these tablets and actually need them and do well from them. But, you know, we're talking about your experience here. In terms of when you approached young adulthood and started to obviously embark on a career, tell us a bit about that.
Sure. I mean, I left school and I was a little bit confused, and I thought I'd do a psychology degree, thinking that would help. It didn't.
Okay.
But it did make me more interested in what these drugs did, and so I specialised in clinical and social psychology.
Wow, okay.
Looking at what the impact of what these drugs were, whilst taking them all the time as well.
Yeah, yeah. And they do help a lot of people out there, don't they, these particular types of drugs. But then, obviously, you're now coming at it. I mean, what year was this, roughly, when you were sort of researching all of this?
I was in my early 20s.
Right.
So we're going back to sort of mid to late 70s.
Mid to late 70s. So in the mid to late 70s, I guess these types of pharmaceutical drugs are still quite, were they new? Were they been around for 20 years? And certainly the alternative or the complementary was very, very early stages, I should imagine, in those years.
Yes, I mean, pretty much the answer at that time was to have the pills, and in particular Prozac was one of the...
That was the first one, I think, yeah.
You know, that was one of the main ones that took off on a large scale and was taken universally.
Right. So when you started to research into the pharmaceutical and then obviously in the holistic side, tell us about that, because that's fascinating.
Sure. I mean, doing it from an academic point of view is quite different from doing it from a holistic point of view. With the academic things, you look at all the studies, you look at, you know, twin studies, you look at how these things affect people and what they do to the body. When you're looking at it holistically, the first question I asked was, well, what did people do before these things were invented?
Yes, exactly.
And when we rewind it back to that, and people say, oh, well, you know, people killed themselves more, didn't they? Well, there's not really any evidence for that in particular.
Right.
And then you look at when they were invented, and then what happened afterwards. So looking at the history of pharmaceuticals is quite interesting, because people who were holistic therapists around that time, around 1910, early 1900s, they were banished.
Right. Okay.
They were either locked up or they were sent away. And something called the Flexner Act was brought in, which gave more weight to doing that. And then, of course, the Western model of medicine was set up and the universities were funded, and that's how things became as they are now.
Right. Interesting. So tell me, Tony, when did you start to realise that this wasn't for you, this particular, all these tablets, all these drugs? And I think you also experienced shock therapy as well, did you?
I did. I did. Sort of after some of life's ups and downs, when I was taking a large amount of these drugs, I then got to the point where I was going through a very difficult point in life. All my contracts had dried up, my house was being repossessed, the bills were piling up, court summonses, etc. And it was Christmas Eve 2011, and another relationship had just come to an end. And around Christmas, everybody's quite jolly and so on. And I found myself with no money, nobody I could contact at all. And I took all the antidepressants I had, and a couple of cheap bottles of wine I had left, so I had no food left in the fridge, and I took the lot.
And how old were you when this happened?
It was 12 years ago, so around mid-50s.
Wow, wow. Well, I'm sorry that you went through that. I truly am. And if anyone's listening to Tony's story and being affected by it, and please do contact NTV to contact Tony, and we'll leave some details at the end of the show. But in terms of your own personal journey, when you'd obviously hit rock bottom at that point, how on earth did you manage to get yourself out of that place that you were in?
That's an interesting question, because when I took these, I sat in the bath with the idea that if the drugs and the drink didn't do it, then my head would go underwater with drowsiness and I would drown.
Wow.
It's really well planned out. However, clearly didn't work, and I woke up and found myself in the locked ward of a hospital.
Right. And who actually found you to take you to the hospital?
To this day, I have no idea.
Wow.
No idea. I don't know if it was a neighbour. I don't know
Right.
if the person who had just left me had come back and found me and then called an ambulance. I don't know.
Wow. What an incredible story. So you ended up in the hospital. Talk us through the story, if it's not too painful for you, of course.
Sure. I woke up. I didn't have any clothes. I had, one of these hospital gowns that sort of leaves all exposed at the rear. I didn't have any money, didn't have my phone, had absolutely nothing. And I was in a single room at that time when I came round. And then the nurse came in, I sort of said, "What's going on? Where am I? What happened?" And they explained that I'd been brought in by the ambulance and that I was going to be there for some time. And then I was just plied with more and more drugs.
Right.
After a while, a doctor came in and said that my depression was so intransigent they would have to do something a bit more severe.
Right.
And what they did was give me 17 courses of electroconvulsive therapy.
Wow. This was in your 50s?
Yes.
Wow.
Now, if people are not aware of what that is, it involves putting electrodes to either side of the head. Your arms and legs are strapped down because it's going to shock you and you'll be all over the place. And then a shock is passed through you. You even have something wrapped around your tongue to make sure that you don't swallow your tongue whilst this is going on.
Wow. This is just unbelievable. And I didn't realise it was actually quite recent that this happened. I was thinking this was something in your 20s.
This was 2011, 12.
So if it's, that obviously went on. Did you see through the course of the treatment?
Yes, I had to undergo that because I said, when can I leave? And they said, you'll leave when we tell you you can. And that period just seemed to go on and on and on. And because I didn't have a phone, I couldn't contact anybody. I didn't have any money or anything, no clothes even. But one day in the corner of the ward, I saw an old computer, went on it, got onto Facebook, and I was just scrolling, very drugged up at the time, and I recognised the name of somebody that I was at school with 30 years previously, and I just messaged him. I said, "Long time no see, could you do me a favour, come and spring me from a mental hospital?"
And are we allowed to mention the name of this friend, or is that a secret?
Well, I'm not sure that he'd like to be.
Fine, okay. Right. Well done, friend. If you can hear us and see us, thank you, because Tony's here with us now. So talk us through what happened when the friend, obviously, did he come and get you? Yeah,
he drove all the way down from Warwickshire with his wife.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful. I mean, most people would see that and just go, block, delete, bye-bye. But he came down with his wife and said to the medics, "We are his responsible adults, now let him out." And they did.
They did.
But if they didn't turn up and do that, I have no idea what would have or could have happened.
It's amazing, it's like the sliding doors, the film. Your life can go either one way or the other. And
yes.
thankfully you're still here and you've done amazing since all of this. I mean, that would have finished off most people to be through that kind of experience, but it hasn't for you. So tell us what happened afterwards. I mean, eager to get to where we are now.
When I got out, managed to get some things sorted out. I had a good GP at the time who managed to keep all my creditors at bay whilst I got sorted out. And then I rented out the house that was about to be repossessed.
Right.
And went to live with the person who's now my wife. And then decided to go into property, which is what I've been doing previously.
Right.
In a previous life, I was a local authority housing director.
That's right.
I thought, what should we do? Oh, let's carry on with property. To do that, it was probably more sensible to move up north because London's so expensive, so we did that. And then, just in the middle of buying the first property, I collapsed on the floor, screaming because I was unable to wee.
Oh.
I was taken down to A&E and they said, looks like you have a prostate issue.
Right.
We'll have to line up some biopsies to see whether or not it's cancerous.
Right. Now, just on that point alone, what would your message be to males of a certain age about prostate? Because you've obviously had experience on the front line here. If you was to give any advice to people at home, what would it be? If
you experience anything unusual whatsoever, then please go and get yourself checked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's actually more and more common now. I believe it's the diagnosis of prostate cancer is going up every year, sadly.
I mean, you've raised a very good point there, because the diagnosis of all cancers is going through the roof, and it seems to be more prevalent now than ever. Depending on who you listen to, it's suggested that 1 in 2 people in 2050 will be affected by some form of cancer, which raises lots of questions.
It does, absolutely. And we'll come on to kind of prevention and everything later, which is the highly topical subject at the moment. So back to your own experience. So you had this prostate issue.
Yes.
So tell us about from the diagnosis side to how you actually, I mean, was it,
sure,
you managed to clear it, I guess?
Well, I had to go for some biopsies, and also around that time, my back started to give way.
Right.
When I was younger, I used to run in plimsolls. I don't know if you remember plimsolls.
Yeah.
Sort of very thin soles, not like these lovely trainers which have nice...
Like running around on the floor, basically, with bare feet. But
yes.
Yeah, I know. But I actually used to love those shoes. I'd wear them now if I could. But anyway. So yes, so you were saying...
they're quite unforgiving. And as I got older, my back decided to pay me back for doing that.
Okay.
And I ended up with a slip disc, arthritis and sciatica. So I was given very strong medication, tramadol and gabapentin, on top of the antidepressants. And then with regard to the prostate issue, I was given some further pills for that too. So I ended up at one point taking 24 pills a day. 24 pills a day at the age of? Mid-50s. Mid-50s, wow. So what was all this cocktail doing to you? Well, that's a very good point. And I actually asked the medics at one point, I said, what happens when you mix antidepressants with strong painkillers with prostate pills? They said, we don't know. So I said, well, why are you giving them to me then? Now, at the time, I had a property coach who was a really interesting guy. He said, look, you need to stop taking these. And I said, I've been told I have to take them for the rest of my life. And he said, well, that's not going to be very long if you continue mixing these up and taking them. And he sent me to see a friend of his who is a kinesiologist. Can you explain what that means? Right. Kinesiologist is somebody who does something called muscle testing. So they test your muscles against a statement. So for instance, my name is Tony, my arm will stay firm, my name is John, it will go down. Okay. In this instance, what he did was say, bring all your pills, which I did, and my arm just flopped. He said, your body doesn't want any of these. And it's a way of reading the truth. You can't actually lie with it. You know, the answer has to come out, the truth. Right. And He said, you really need to pack these things up.
Okay.
And I'll give you some vitamins and minerals in the meantime. Now, don't do this at home, folks. If you're going to come off pills, go and see your doctor and do it in a measured way. Do not do what I did. I stopped, and for 2 months I just shook and sweated as all this wretched stuff came out, and I was experiencing withdrawal symptoms and just feeling quite wretched.
Yes, I can imagine. How long did that process take for you to become clean of everything?
Well, after 2 months I rang up and said, I can't do this, I have to go back on the pills, I can't take this. And I was advised...
sort of craving.
Well, craving and still detoxing and shaking and sweating, because that's, you know, over 50 years worth of stuff in there. I was advised to go and get some colonic irrigation, which would help wash this out quicker. And the lady who performed that task said, have you ever tried bioresonance? And I said, never heard of it. What's that?
Because you know what my next question is going to be.
I do indeed.
So tell us, what is bioresonance? We hear this a lot now, so...
Yes.
In layman's terms, please.
In layman's terms. It's frequency healing.
Okay.
But it's based on the principles of quantum physics.
Okay.
So there is science behind it.
Right.
With regard to quantum physics, everything vibrates, so although even the table looks like it's still, it's not. And every cell in our body has a particular frequency. And when we're not well, we are vibrating at the wrong frequency, or that cell is vibrating at the wrong frequency. What bioresonance does is harmonize those frequencies so that you're vibrating and those cells are vibrating at the right frequency. And then that helps the body to heal itself.
Right, right.
And this became so clear to me with what happened next.
Right.
I went for the first biopsy and was getting some bioresonance treatment at the same time. After the first biopsy, the consultant said, I don't know what's happening, but we'll monitor you, go away and come back and have another biopsy in a few weeks. Had some more bioresonance, went back, and he said, look, here's the good news, you haven't got cancer and I'm discharging you.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's a fantastic result. And I said, now can you sort my back out?
Right.
Which he did. And as a result of him sorting my back out, I lost the pain, didn't need any more pills, dropped 2 stone, was able to go back to the gym. And I said, why don't people know about this? And then I started to do my own research as to why this was not why it was not widely known. And I said, we were going to invest in property. I don't want to do that now. Just get me one of these devices and teach me everything you know.
Fabulous. This is amazing, this story. It's almost like you have had quite a lot thrown at you where you could have actually just fallen over and not be with us anymore, let's be honest. But you seem to have bounced back quite a few times. So, you know, do you believe that you've been kept here for a reason, as a spiritual sense?
I think I probably should have departed at several stages, actually.
But you didn't, and you're still here.
Yes, you know, I've had serious car accidents and come through those.
We're about to go to commercial break very soon. So thank you, Tony, for sharing this amazing story. And when we come back to the next part of this amazing interview, we'll find out more about Tony's holistic clinic and what he's doing at the moment in London. And I look forward to seeing you after the commercial break. Thank you. Thank you again for being here today. So let's pick up from where we left off in the first half.
Right.
So we were talking about the muscle testing.
Yes.
What was that called again?
Kinesiology.
Kinesiology, and you had all of that done, and you then went through a bioresonance. Just remind us what bioresonance is again.
It's frequency healing, which balances the frequencies in your body.
Yes.
And every cell has a frequency, and we ensure that they're vibrating at the right frequency.
So after you experienced all of this, let's call it complimentary, you, am I right in thinking that all the tablets that you were taking, you stopped those over a period of time, obviously, which is the right way to do it?
That is the right way. I did the wrong way.
You did it the wrong way. Okay, right. Don't do it Tony's way. But in terms of your sort of depletion, you just kind of came out of this clinic healed from the cancer. Am I right in saying that?
Yes. I was discharged and said that's it. No more cancer.
So you came out healthy, well, and now this is Tony from pre-tablets.
Yes.
So how did you feel? What did that feel like to come to sort of almost walk away from that chapter of your life?
I think the word is discombobulating.
I know what that word is, but what does that mean, discombobulating?
Right. It was confusing because I didn't know what it was like to live without those pills. And what's even more disturbing in a way is I didn't know me because I didn't know me without those pills.
Right.
So I had to get to know me.
So talk us through how you actually managed to achieve that.
Well, again, I have to give credit to the coach I had at the time, and he made me read a load of books by Joe Dispenza, Dr. John DeMartini, Marissa Peer. So those are the kind of people who I started to look up to and learn from. And then I went back into looking at what were then called the New Thought leaders, the people who came up with the ideas that you are what you think, and what you think you become, and the mind-body connection, and how powerful that is. Starting to see that opened my eyes to what possibilities there might be, and also how we might restrict ourselves due to our thoughts, which to a large extent is due to our programming and our education. And I suppose what it said to me is that people really need to be taught more of this stuff earlier in life. I mean, there are several things wrong with the education system. Children ought to be taught about finance, they ought to be taught about health, two most important things. And I suppose as I became older, it became clearer to me how important those two foundations are.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think there are steps being made towards that, but certainly we're not there yet, I would say, in the larger scheme of things. In terms of this sort of new way of thinking, okay, that has been, I suppose, from reading books from all these great people, is there a way that you could summarise for our audience at home, on your camera here, to almost share some little takeaways or some advice if someone at home's feeling a little bit down or there's a bit of depression in the household? Is there something that you could share with the guys at home now?
Sure, there are some basic things to consider. Firstly, how are you sleeping? Are you sleeping well? If not, then we need to look at what might be impacting that. The second thing is quite a simple thing, but so many people take it for granted. Are you hydrated? Are you drinking enough water? Not tea or coffee, water. 60 to 70% of us is water, and if we don't replenish that every day, then we start to become dehydrated, we don't absorb things, we don't function at the level that we should do. Next is exercise. Now, some people enjoy exercise, some don't. I have to say I have to force myself to exercise, but there again I know that I feel better afterwards. So that's a sort of cost-benefit thing going on there. The next thing is diet. Now, some of the things that we're told are healthy are not healthy, and some of the things that we're told are unhealthy actually are healthy. So it's a question of working out which is which. If you're going to eat things from the supermarket, have a look at the packet, and if you see something with regard to the ingredients that you can't pronounce or recognise, it's probably not a great thing to eat. However, food that is made up like that, which is often called processed food, is cheaper, and so people will gravitate towards that. Then there are some foods that are cooked in seed oils. Not a great thing to have. Coconut oil and olive oil, virgin olive oil is better. And then there's how much we eat as well. So we might be programmed to eat 3 times a day, but we might not necessarily need to eat 3 times a day. In this country, nearly 60% of people are obese. 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. So what's changed in the meantime? A large part of that is down to food, farming methods, and our lifestyles. And the last thing is stress. Most people now suffer from a degree of stress. Many people suffer from too much. So look at the stresses in your life and think about how you might be able to rewind and reduce the amount of stress that you have every day.
Wow, that's amazing, Tony, thank you. And on the last point about stress, what are the statistics currently in this country and then the globe for the prescriptions for antidepressants? Where do they stand right now compared to, let's say, 10 years ago? Sure.
At the moment, nearly 9 million people in this country take antidepressants every day.
Wow.
There's a huge amount of prescriptions that were written in the past 12 months. We are not at the same level of America yet, but we are moving towards that. And one of the more disturbing things is that the age of people taking them is getting lower. There are even children of 12 and younger on antidepressants. Some of those might be particular extreme cases, but I do think that there is an over-medicalisation going on which needs to be reversed. And certainly it's not a great thing when children of that age are being put on them. Well, it's bad enough when I was 15, but to be put on them younger than that, not great.
No. And I guess the other question as a parent, because I'm a mother of 5 children myself, what would be your advice to parents of children who are a little hyperactive? I mean, let's face it, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we didn't know ADD or ADHD. What's your take on all of that?
Might not be very popular, however.
Be controversial as you like.
A lot of it goes back to the food.
Right.
And if you look at the colorants and additives in a lot of food, you know, these are just not real foods. And what that's doing to children's brains is not great. Then there's the lifestyle of kids too. Certainly when I was at school, if it was snowing, you can't sit inside, get out in the playground. There was no way around it. Whereas now, children are not encouraged to go out as much as we were. They're not encouraged to exercise as much as we were. And the advent of phones has not helped either in particular.
Right.
You know, children can't communicate as well as they used to. They're very good with the thumbs and the text, which I'm not very good at all, but they can do. In fact, our whole society has moved away from talking to texting.
Okay, so on that point, thank you, Tony. We will pick this up after the commercial break. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon. I'm Victoria Beale, your host for NTV Unscripted, and this is our final section for the show this evening. So I'm here interviewing the wonderful Tony Courtney Brown, who's based here in London in Wimbledon. He has a complimentary clinic, and we have just been discussing a fascinating life that Tony has led to bring him to where he is today, to help people of all ages globally with more complementary therapy. So, Tony, before we went to our commercial break, we were talking about children, ADHD, ADD. You know, in the larger scheme of things, these are relatively new diagnoses for kids. But we're talking about the food
Yes.
and the social media and the devices that all have an impact.
Yes.
So as parents at home watching you today, is there some takeaways or advice that you could give parents at home to kind of help their children, but also make it a little bit easier to be a parent in 2024? We all need a bit of that, don't we?
I wish I had a magic wand, but I mean, one thing is certainly limiting the children's exposure to social media. Kids can be very cruel, and the things that they do to each other are really not very nice. Some people can cope with that, but some kids are very sensitive, and it has more of an effect on them, obviously, than others. I want to talk a bit about suicide as well, because the rate of suicide in this country at the moment stands at about 100 a week, and 75% of those are men. And the most common way that people are doing it is hanging.
Right.
That's men.
Right.
Men tend to hold things in more. They don't talk about their feelings as much. But if any of your male friends or male family members are acting differently, try and talk to them, find out what's going on in their lives, because the more it's held in, is the worse it gets. When people say sometimes that they're going to commit suicide, listen to them. Don't ignore them. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to do it, but there's something going on that needs to be addressed. And with regard to behaviour, when people start behaving a bit out of character, or going very quiet, or becoming very reclusive, please watch those people most. Often the people who commit suicide are not the ones who say they're going to do it. They're the ones whose behaviour changes, and then they go and do something. If you or a loved one are feeling like you're going down a slippery slope, or you're feeling very alone, please reach out. At the end of the programme, we'll be talking more about how you can do that.
Thank you, Tony, for mentioning that, because it's a big subject, and I'm sure everyone at home has been affected in some way by losing a loved one to suicide, sadly. In terms of, let's say for example, there's somebody watching right now and you've just described somebody that they know. Is there any advice that you can give that person? Let's call them the saviour of the person that's considering suicide. What can that person do right now to go and help?
First thing they can do is go and get them to open up, if they will. Talk to them about the Samaritans. Talk to them about going to get some help, some counselling. Talk to them about what support network they have, if any, and if not, then try and help them create one. Get them to write down how they're feeling every day. If you can, speak to them every day. Monitor what's happening, and also let other professionals know what is going on with that particular individual. If they're at school, let the school know. If they're at work, tell HR. Make sure somebody somewhere knows.
Sound advice, thank you. I mean, we could talk about this all day, this particular subject, and thank you for sharing that, because it's a very difficult thing for people to hear, but sometimes we have to hear these things to be able to help others. In terms of what you're doing now, you've got a fabulous clinic based in Wimbledon, but talk us through, I want to hear about a success story. I want to hear about somebody that you've helped recently. Are you able to share that with us?
Sure, yeah. The main thing people come to us with at the moment are things like chronic fatigue, long COVID, allergies, in particular stomach pains, or sometimes they're sports people with injuries. The typical person is a woman between 40 and 60 who is what we call the sandwich generation.
Right.
They're running around trying to look after elderly parents on one hand, they're looking after kids on the other hand, they're juggling a job or career, going through the menopause, and then also probably trying to keep a relationship or marriage going at the same time. And that's an incredible feat. I don't know how people do it, so not surprisingly, some people become stressed and ill as a result.
So you've treated someone like this and you've helped them. Is there a particular one that sticks in your mind that you could share with us?
One person who sticks in our mind is somebody who came to see us with long COVID. They had been off work for a while, worried about losing their job.
Right.
I'll talk a little bit about some of the therapies that we have that help.
Yeah.
One in particular is hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Right.
Now, for those who are not aware of this, it involves sitting in an oxygen chamber with a mask over your nose and mouth and breathing in more or less pure oxygen. As we are now, we're breathing in about 23% oxygen.
Right.
And when you're in the chamber, you're breathing in between 95 and 100%. And what this does is energizes the body. It gets the cells going.
Right.
Now, Ronaldo, brilliant footballer, he uses one because A, it keeps him at the top of his game literally, and secondly, if he gets injured, it helps him to heal quicker.
Interesting.
You might remember Michael Jackson was famously known for sleeping in an oxygen tent. If you remember his dancing, which was quite frenetic, goodness knows how he did that, and the moonwalk and everything else, he'd injure himself all the time. So sleeping in an oxygen chamber would heal his legs quicker,
Right.
so that he didn't have to take time out, and he can carry on dancing and performing without missing time.
It's so fascinating.
And with regard to people who come to us, there was a lady who, as I said, was afraid of losing her job,
Yes.
and so we gave her oxygen therapy on a regular basis until she became more energized and was able to get back to work and do what she loved doing most.
Interesting.
Other people, we've had a lady who had an advanced form of long COVID, which is called POTS,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that person ended up bedbound for
Right.
6 months. Now, she was also getting some treatment at a hospital, but also came to see us for oxygen therapy and red light therapy as well.
Okay.
And the combination of those enabled her to get her life back.
So what does the oxygen do to the body and the red light do, and how does it work together? We are actually coming to the end of our show, would you believe it? So we've only got 10 seconds to tell us, and then
Right.
we'll have to finish, which I'm really sad about.
They help the body to heal itself. The red light therapy also replicates the effects of the sun.
Okay.
It will heal any surface issues with the skin and
Okay.
also the bones and joints. It will ease your aches and pains there. The oxygen therapy, we've even had a doctor bring his Alzheimer's patient in, knowing he'd given him all the drugs he could, but knowing that oxygenation would stop his cognitive decline at the rate at which it was going.
Right.
Oxygen therapy is so useful for a wide range of things, and it's going to become very, very popular as an alternative to just taking pills.
Amazing. Well, listen, Tony, I could talk to you for hours and hours, and I'm sure there will be another show on the horizon with myself and Tony in the future. But if any of these subjects have affected you or anything resonates with you, here at NTV Unscripted on this particular show with Tony Courtney Brown, please do get in touch with the TV studio, and if you would like to contact Tony directly, then you can contact Tony through NTV. So thank you so much for watching. I believe there's a number on the bottom of the screen now that you can call if you want to contact Tony directly. But if you've enjoyed today, thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again soon, and it's been wonderful to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're very welcome.